So how can we expect to attract or achieve the very thing that we resent someone else for having, right? It works against the law of attraction.
Born in 92 on the block with the sharks. Come from a different cloth, y'all would get ripped apart. You want it diamond, then you gotta get it in the dark. We dropping nuggets like Carmelo went to Rucker Park. Now we eating from state to state, we scrape the plate. I put my eggs in a basket, took a leap of faith. I took a chance, now we grow and see the impact. Decoding success with special guests, now let's bring Matt.
Ashley, firstly, I would like to thank you for joining the show. Super excited to have you and to decode your success. So again, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Of course. Cool. So first question for you straight off the bat. This is how we kick off every episode. I'm curious, how do you personally define success?
Wow, getting right into it. I love it. How do I personally? Okay, so how successful I am really depends on one question. How happy am I? Because I create my own happiness, right? I'm in charge of that. I create my own happiness. So when we ask ourselves if we're happy, the more happy we are, the more successful we are, at least for me, right? So that's for me. And for me, if I define what that means for me, like what makes me happy, what success means to me is growing. Because if I'm not growing, I'm dying. Right. And I'm happy when I'm growing. So that means growing every year in my business, growing every year in my personal development and my emotional mastery, growing every year in my spirituality, growing every year in what I can give to my loved ones and those that I care about, and then giving every year through what I contribute back to this planet, in the well-being of this planet through, philanthropy, through my humanitarian efforts. So always growing.
I love that. Now, what happens when you're not growing? What happens when Ashley kind of hits like maybe a road bump or a roadblock? What is she doing to kind of pivot to get back on track?
Yeah, exactly. Because, success is like a day by day thing too, right? So there's going to be some days where it just happened the other day where I was just having one of those days, right? I wouldn't define that as a successful day, right? So, what I've learned in those moments is the biggest one for me is to lean into support. I have 2 coaches. I'm a part of 3 masterminds. And what I used to do that did not work is I would go into my lone wolf. I would go and throw myself a pity party. I would dwell, and then something that, one bad day could then turn into a bad week, a bad month. You know what I mean? So that for me is what I've learned to do. And at first, I was raised growing up that asking for support meant that I was weak. So that was a new muscle I really got to exercise over the years, is like, no, asking for help means I'm strong, I'm courageous, I'm brave.
Right. So what was it that actually helped you get into that mindset, right? Because I've been there, whether it's personally in my business, whatever the case is. What was it that said, all right, Ashley, like go ask for help? Was it a certain situation, or was it just like over the course of time, you were like, you know what, that's it. Like I'm going to get it.
That's a good question with a great, I have a point blank answer for that. And it is ALA, Ascension Leadership Academy. That was the catalyst for my whole transformation. And no, I don't get any kind of commission for saying that. It's just the truth. It was a transformational training that I did, and it was very, very deep, intensive, confrontational, interruptive work. And I was brought to my knees. I was crying, I was shaking, I was screaming, like that whole process. It was 4 months long. If I hadn't have done that, I would not be here today. That was the catalyst for everything that happened afterwards.
Why do you feel like you wouldn't be here today? Like you couldn't have done it in a different way, or like?
Because it was the catalyst for everything that followed. So what I mean is maybe I would be somewhere else, right? Like I don't know that I would be here, because my mission, and even almost, well, not all, but almost all of the modalities I teached were birthed from what I learned and what I experienced and what I went through in ALA. And sometimes when I say that, people get kind of, taken aback and kind of thrown off, because they're like, how can you put so much emphasis into this one training? And for some people, maybe, they went through it and they didn't have such a crazy experience as I did, but I did, I really did. And I was going down, another reason why I say that is because I was going down a spiral, like dark spiral just before I joined and entered that container. And I would have kept going in that route, hadn't I had that interruption.
Right. So, all right, let's connect the dots here. I guess, who was Ashley in high school, right? Like we know who you are now. We're getting to know you better now. Who
Mhm.
was Ashley in high school? What was she up to? Who was she hanging out with? What was her dream back then? How was she defining success back then, etc.?
Yeah, very different. I was lost. I was very, I wasn't confident at all. I was super insecure. I was teased and bullied throughout most of my youth. And I used to eat lunch in the girls' bathroom stall by myself to avoid the pain of rejection. One day it only took that one day in the cafeteria when the most popular girl in school was throwing French fries at me. You
Mm.
know, I would get prank phone calls to my house. I was teased a lot for my body. So I was really, really skinny. I wore kids' clothes all through even high school. I think it was like that final year of high school, I started to be able to fit in double zeros from like PacSun. um, yeah, I was teased a lot for my body, and I would get prank phone calls saying, "Oh, just so you know, there's a McDonald's that just around the street from your house. Maybe you should go there and eat a burger. Maybe five. Ha ha ha."
Wow.
So I would get teased a lot for that. I was put up on gossip blogs. Even in college, I was put up on a gossip blog called thedirty.com. I don't know if you know about that.
I've never heard of
Um,
it.
yeah, it's a it's a really big gossip blog. So I got a lot of hits, hundreds of comments on that. I mean, so yeah, I went through the ringer, and I was very, very, I was hard on I looked in the mirror and I hated what I saw. Like I would look in the mirror and I would just feel this utter disappointment. And I would look at other women, other girls, and I just wish I could be like them. Like not even just look like them. Yes, look like them, but also be like them.
Right.
Yeah.
So how did you transfer out of comparing yourself then? Because it seems like that's what it kind of was. I mean, obviously the bullying and stuff like that
Mhm.
probably added to the fuel of comparing, because you're like, why am I not like these people? But like, how did you get out of comparing yourself?
Oh, that was the process. It's still, I mean, I still catch myself from time to time getting into
Right.
comparison. I think every woman, every man, we slip into that trap every now and then, but it's knowing what to do when we find ourselves there, right? Um, and I wouldn't have even, I was really in an unconscious place back then. So even if you told me I was comparing, I would have probably denied it. I would
Right.
have been like, no, I'm not, you know,
Right. Right. Right.
but now what I've come to realize is, I now deeply understand this truth about comparison. A, I'm aware of when I do it and what that looks like, feels like, etc. And B, I know what it does. And comparison, envy, jealousy, right? They're rooted in resentment, right? We're resenting the other person for having what we want,
Mhm.
right? So, how can we expect to attract or achieve the very thing that we resent someone else for having, right? It works against the law of attraction. It
Mhm.
works against the law of manifestation. So,
Right.
when I really got that, like really got that, I started shifting to admiration, appreciation, and most importantly, inspiration. Like I'll look at someone, like a woman who has what I want, and instead of going straight to envy and like, oh, like woe is me, why don't I have that? Like, oh, I hope that her business fails. I hope that, and then you start wishing the worst. That's resentment, right? And then women, we do that. Like women, especially, we're very, like, we can get that way, right? That's why women are known to be catty. But that's why there's also this shift happening in the collective right now, because we're realizing that it's painful. That does not feel good to be thinking those thoughts and feeling that way. And B, it accomplishes the exact opposite of what it is that deep down we truly desire, right? So
Right.
now when I see a woman having what I want someday, right, I'll look at her and I'll think, that means it's possible for me. Yes. Like she's
Right.
proof that it's possible for me too, you know?
Exactly. I'm curious. I mean, for me personally, I see that comparison, and this is in my earlier 20s, I'm in my later 20s now. personally for me, comparison happened often, more so with the people that were closer to me than anyone else. Did you
Hmm.
experience that? Or so like for me, I'm very grateful for all of my friends, and then I would see my friends succeeding, I'll be like, fuck, like I'm comparing myself to them. And I'm like,
Yeah.
a little bit of jealousy pops up, a little bit of envy pops up. Did you
Mhm.
experience anything like that?
Oh
Or
yeah, definitely, definitely. I was funny. I was just talking to my girlfriend Mel Wells, who's also amazing, powerful female on fire. I love her. She's on my podcast, and I'm actually visiting her in Costa Rica next week. So we
awesome.
were talking about this because she had this issue with it, where because she's a bright woman, like she shines, right? And she would have these friendships over and over where she kept feeling like she needed to dull herself and like
Mhm.
dull and like kind of like, hold back because she didn't want to make the other woman uncomfortable, because then the other woman would get jealous and competitive, right?
Wow.
So
Yeah.
it's interesting because what I love about Mel and I's friendship is we're actually opposite. I didn't feel that. I didn't feel the way that she felt. I was the one comparing and competing and getting jealous. That was me, right? So Mel and I are very different that way, but it's cool to now be friends with her and to talk about that, right? From both sides,
Right.
And for me, it was like, I remember, oh yeah, my best friend for 10 years, Shannon, I'll tell her right now, Shannon Malmborg. I hope she's listening. She was my best friend for 10 years. I found myself constantly, because she's a super likable, magnetic woman. Like she always has been. She was like, everyone just loves Shannon. And I would just get jealous. I would find myself jealous when anyone would compliment her, when anyone would show her attention, when someone would become friends with her, right? Where they would get close to her and I'm like, no, she's mine. Like is their friendship better than my friendship with her? Right. So, and it would
Right.
drive me crazy. And it was also not good for the friendship, obviously, because she could feel that the whole time. So yeah, I
That's so
100% relate with
interesting.
that.
Yeah, that's crazy. So I
Mhm.
saw something on your website, and I don't want to misquote it, and it goes into everything that we were talking about from your, your high school years and beyond. You had a quote that says, "Change happens when the pain of remaining the same outweighs the pain of change." I'm just going to
Yeah.
ask why, because, and let me go into it a
Why
little
does
bit.
it have to be that way?
Why, no, like seriously, why does it have to be that way? And I just personally experienced that in my own life. I know that a partner of mine just experienced that, or is kind of still experiencing it. It's like, why do we have to wait for like the 2x4 to hit us before we create these changes? Like, why do we have to get to rock bottom per se before that change happens,
Well, the cool thing is this: rock bottom looks different for everyone,
Right.
right? But I truly believe this. I truly believe that our biggest breakthroughs come from our biggest breakdowns. Esther
Mhm.
Hicks writes about this in a different way, right? She says, do you know Esther Hicks'
Yeah,
work?
definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely.
love her. So she writes about it, and I'm probably going to butcher this, but basically what she says is, from the deepest darkness, our brightest light is born, right? So we need the dark. Light could not exist without dark, right? It just couldn't. How
Right.
could light exist without darkness, right?
Right.
Light is what lights up the dark room. So I think, yes, it's part of something else I say a lot is beauty of the contrast. Like, we humans are human. We're human. And so we get to appreciate that no one is perfect. No one's gonna go 365 days with every day being a happy, bright, light day. Like, no,
Right.
because that's not how it works. And we get to be grateful for those moments that are dark, for those times in our lives that are dark, for those times where we do hit quote unquote rock bottom, and get excited because guess what's on the other side of that? My girlfriend, actually, this is funny. She called me. She's going through a breakup. Okay. She calls me. She's in her bathtub taking a bath with the candles lit, and she is sobbing. I mean, she feels heartbroken. Like, any ladies listening right now, and men, that feeling of heartbreak, right? Like,
It
it's
sucks. Yeah,
tough.
it
It's
sucks.
the matters of the heart. It always stings the most, right? And she's in so much pain. And I just, I just go, babe, I am so happy for you right now. And she stops crying. She goes, huh? I said, because, like, you're feeling really low, right? And she's like, well, yeah. Like, you're feeling really bad right now, like really dark, right? Yeah. Do you know what's on the other side of this? Like,
Right.
you're going to meet the most incredible man. Like, you're going to be in the most amazing relationship that's like 10 times better than him. Like, do you see that? And she does the work. She's in the work like me. So she literally goes, oh my God, I just got chills. You're right. You're totally, completely right. And I'm like, yeah, girl. So feel all those dark feelings and move right on along. Get excited because I'm excited for you.
So on the topic of relationships though, it's not easy to believe that. Like in that moment,
sure.
how do you believe that? Like, of course, okay, cool. From my personal experience, I'll believe it for a day and then I'll go right back to that
Yeah.
dark place.
Yeah.
So like, how do you stay consistent with keeping that belief after a heartbreak?
Yeah. So it's a muscle that you build,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
So you're not gonna get over someone overnight, and you're not gonna get over someone over 2 nights, 3 nights, like it takes time, like especially like matters of the heart, like it's healing. Like
Right.
there needs to be a healing process. Now, the biggest thing when it comes to heartbreak, and I've experienced heartbreak time and time again in my own life, um, is don't resist, because what we resist persists and actually
Mm,
festers and grows. And that's the mistake people will make, right? They'll numb out, they'll push, they'll avoid, they'll resist. And that's because they don't want to feel that pain, right?
right.
They don't want to
100%.
cry in they don't want to cry in a bathtub. They don't.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But like sometimes you need to cry in a bathtub. And like think of it as like taking out the trash. Like you got to just take out the trash. You got to purge sometimes. You got to let it out. Not now, I want to be clear. There's a fine line between purging and re-energizing the victim story,
Mm,
right? Because saying like, how could he did this to me. Oh, how dare she did this, whatever. That's victim. And you
right.
keep going in victim. That's going to completely take away your power, right? Because when we allow ourselves to become responsible, we're saying we're powerful. We're more powerful than this situation, circumstance, or person, right? They don't have power over us. So I want to be clear that, and this gets a lot of the times misunderstood, is when I say let it out, purge it out, that doesn't mean be in victim and keep being in victim and don't get out of bed and keep thinking the thoughts that are keeping you stuck and feeling miserable. Do you
Right.
see what I'm saying? There's a
100%. Yeah.
difference. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously I'm a man, I date women, and what I notice personally is that some women that go through heartbreak will start taking on like super masculine energy. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
like picking
Mhm.
up overtime at
Yeah.
work and like
Mhm.
going for all those financial goals. And listen, it's not to say women can't do that, but that's a masculine thing,
Yeah.
you know? What's your advice there? Because being on the flip side of it and seeing it, like I want to help these women, but at the same time, I mean, I can get like super personal here, but it's just like I want to help, but it's really hard to like hearing it from a man, you know?
Well, so that's a form of resistance. What you
It
just said.
is.
Yeah, that's a form of resistance. Absolutely. That's their way of avoiding the pain.
Right.
So remember when I said earlier that I was like, oh, when I ask for and receive help, it means I'm weak. Remember when I said that?
Right.
It
Yep.
was like an old
100%.
belief I had. So that's the unhealthy pattern and shadow pattern that women can fall into, right? And men can fall into this too. So that is the best way that this woman knows how to deal with that pain. And yes, it's unhealthy, right? It doesn't work because, like I just said, what we resist persists. In other words, eventually they're going to have to deal with that, right? They're
Yeah.
going to have to deal with it. And the thing that breaks my heart is if they don't deal with it on their own, they're going to have to deal with it by experiencing another heartbreak again, because it's a feedback loop, right? So that's
100%. Yeah.
why women or men will end up in the same toxic relationships, same situation, new person, same toxic relationship, new person, same experience, new job, right? Whatever. But it's because we haven't taken that time to go inward and really, really get responsible for how I ended up here. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Because if we don't get
Yeah.
responsible, we just stay in victim and we'll keep perpetuating the same victim story over and over again in new ways.
It all goes back to that quote you had on your website. It literally
Yeah.
all goes back to that. It's so crazy. All
Yeah.
right, so you are now in a new relationship. I mean, for some time now. Like, how did you know this new relationship was the one? Like,
So at first I didn't. He knew before I knew. I felt it was funny. We've been asked to share our love story because it's a very powerful one. I'm not going to share the whole thing here because it is a long one. It's a beautiful one. Very, very, it's has spiritual components to it, which is very, very beautiful. But I did not know until probably about halfway through the relationship. And I was my personality pattern, I'm an analyzer. Okay. So
Okay.
I'm not only an analyzer, I'm an analyzing controller. Now, I don't know if you know the personality matrix, but that's what I'm referring to. The personality matrix
Right.
has controller, promoter, analyzer, and supporter. Those are the 4 quadrants. Well, I am, my tendency is to be an analyzing controller, which means that my practice is surrender. My practice is letting go. My practice is trusting. My practice is trusting the process, right? And the truth is that Gerard reminded me a lot of my ex when I met him. You know, this influencer, cameras following him around, and I'm thinking, you know, not doing that again. You know what I mean? But the
Right.
thing is like, you know, it was a cool thing for me to. He was so persistent, because if he wasn't so persistent, you know, I would have probably left, you know, moved along. But he was very persistent. He was a man who knew what he wanted. And of course, that's very attractive to a woman. And it makes you want to say, okay, what's possible? What's here for me? And I fell madly in love with Gerard. You know, I fell in love with him when he really started shedding his own armor, right? When he started
Right.
really letting me see all those goofy, vulnerable parts of him that y'all don't see, you know, but I get to
Right.
see
Right.
that, you know?
Right.
And
It's
and the,
so
and
interesting.
the other thing too is I've never, ever, 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 ever felt more seen by a man. Like
Hmm.
he believes in me and sees me and all of my possibility, right? And I've had men that were in the past intimidated by that and actually didn't like that. They were like, can you just stay at home? And I'm like, no,
Right.
I love what I do.
Now, what's interesting to me is that you say women like a man that knows exactly what he wants. And you also said it was super attractive that once you saw that vulnerable side, like it just went off to the next level.
Mhm.
I've experienced that scaring women, like to the point where like it literally scared them, like, holy shit, like this guy knows exactly where he wants to go, exactly where he wants us to be, et cetera, et cetera. And like the woman's there like a fucking deer in headlights,
Want
you
me to tell
know?
you why?
Please, I'm still trying to figure it out.
Because she has no idea. You
About
met a
what?
woman that's not ready for you at
Right,
where you're at yet.
right, right.
She has no idea what she wants. So it scares her to be with someone who knows what they want.
Mm,
That used to scare me. Oh, yeah, are you kidding? That used to scare. I was that girl who wanted the man who didn't know what the F he wanted and would freaking dangle me around like a freaking and use like a used tissue. You know, I'd be like, okay, well, you're good for today. And then tomorrow I'm gonna go hang out with that chick. I was that girl. And some of my girlfriends are still going through that right now. And I'm just
mm,
blessing them from afar and supporting them because that's all I can do. Right. But they got to figure it out on their own. They got to hit their own rock bottom or whatever, right?
right.
But I was that woman. Like I was dating these quote unquote, you know, playboys, punks who were not going to settle down. But at the time, I didn't know what I wanted. You know,
Mm,
I wasn't whole. So that's why, and it's funny that I love that you asked that question because I've literally had this conversation with my girlfriends and I'm like, listen, I pray for the day when because they'll tell me about like a man, they'll vent to me, oh, he did this and he said he was going to do, and he didn't, and then I found out he was with another girl, and I would say, I pray for the day, and I'm so excited for the day when that repulses you, when that turns you off and you immediately lose interest. This guy has nothing, because what happens is those girls, they continue to obsess over that guy. You see what I'm saying?
mm,
They're in it for the push pull because they're push pulling within themselves. They're not they haven't merged within, so then they don't know how to merge with somebody else at all. You know, they can't
right.
connect with somebody else truly if they haven't connected with themselves. So that's just where they're at in their journey.
So, what would your advice be to the man? Like, you were just mentioning the female side of it. What would your advice be to the man experiencing that?
Well, pursue until your boundaries have been crossed, right?
Yeah.
Because all of us get to have, because I believe in this. I believe men are chasers, they're hunters, right? That you're born and bred for this, right? And you love it. You do. It like, you love, that's what you're hunters, you're chasers. You do,
Right.
you love it. So chase and hunt and pursue until and you'll know, right? You identify your boundaries, you identify your values. When it's crossed, a value is broken, a boundary is crossed, that's when it's time to go.
Mm.
But sometimes it does. It can work. I've seen it work. And where a man is persistent or pursues a woman, and then they end up having a beautiful relationship together and co-creating something that is healthy. So yeah, that would be my answer. Pursue until your boundary has been broken.
I love that. I wasn't expecting to go down this whole route here,
Me
but
neither.
I'm
I love
really
that we
enjoying
did.
it. Yeah, me too. I'm curious. I know you do these often. What is a question you wish more people would ask you?
On the podcast?
Yeah, just in general. Maybe not
You
even just
know,
on a podcast.
in
Yeah, like in
general, I would
life or
say,
whatever.
yeah, in general, I would say, instead of why can't I XYZ, I'd love to hear them say, how can I
Mm,
XYZ? I love seeing those kinds of conversations shift. I
right.
also love when I hear, and we talked about this in the beginning of the episode, how can I get support with X? I
Right.
love when I see people that are out seeking support, and it's probably because I just like, hey, humans, we are born and bred for connection. We're actually born to support each other,
We
and
are.
we isolate ourselves, and it's painful. So that I would love to hear more of. How can I get support with X, whatever it is that they're struggling with, so that
Yeah,
we can
that's
help each other.
awesome. That's
Mhm.
beautiful. Something just popped in my head, and it's interesting because this is even bigger than relationships, just in general. Like, how did you get clear on what you wanted? Right? Just in life. Like, it doesn't have to necessarily be in the relationship. That just popped back in the head, and I'm curious because it's good for direction.
Yeah, so I did a lot. ALA, like I said, I'll say it again, was the catalyst for me figuring that out. That's not to say that at the end of ALA, I knew what I wanted. Honestly, I didn't. But I now knew how, like, I knew that I was on that path to figuring it out, and I ended up figuring it out. Now, you'll go through experiences in your life. For example, if we talk about dating, because we've been talking about that, where you'll date someone and they're a window for you into, like, in terms of like what you love about them. They're a window for you. Like, you can see what's possible, and like, they treat me with respect and they treat me like a queen. Wow, that's possible. But maybe there's something else missing. I dated a guy like this. Like, he treated me really well, but the chemistry, the playfulness, it wasn't there. And it hurt me to say goodbye to him because he was so great. But I just got to follow my heart, and he was a window for me, right? Of things that I loved and that I believed was possible. Um, and then you also obviously find out things that you don't like, that don't work for you, that may work for somebody else, but that don't work for you. So you get, what I'm trying to say here is, you get a lot of it from the experiences. And when you stop making yourself wrong for the things that you actually want.
Mm,
Okay. We have a lot of societal pressure, and not only societal pressure, but pressure from our parents, pressure from our friends, like what they think, what's right, what's wrong for them, that we will lose touch with what we want. Now, let me give you an example. This I held shame around for so long. No wonder I kept finding myself in situations where this was like a big, tension point. Is I grew up in a household where my dad was the sole provider. Okay. And he's always been a gentleman. He takes care of me. He takes care of everyone. He was that man. Right. And when I would go out, and I wanted to be taken care of. Like, yes, I'm a boss woman in my business, and I know how to, be my masculine in my business and run the show. But when I'm with my man, like, I want to sit back and I want to be in my feminine. And yes, I know I can afford it. And yes, I know I got me, but I want him to got me. Like, I want to feel got by him. Right. But I
right.
would, for the longest time, I can't even tell you, I would feel bad for wanting that. like, because, today it's a lot of 50-50 happening, because you're seeing, you're seeing women step up and then men step down a little bit. And you're seeing all these things, you're seeing stay-at-home dads, and you're seeing full-time, you're seeing all over the spectrum. So then there's this thing going on in feminist movement, I don't need anybody. I don't need a man. I don't need a man. Right. So I was feeling like I should pay for this meal. I should pay half. I should right. But really, in the back, like on dates, I'd like, no, I want to feel like I'm in the receiving, right? And for some women, by the way, I want to be clear, that was me. That's what I want, right? That's what I wanted. That's what I want. So I have friends that actually don't want that. Like, they actually like to be the one that pay, and they will find their match once they accept that about themselves. So what I'm getting at here is, when you identify and accept what it is you truly want, right? Not shame ourselves or make them wrong. That's when we're going to find it. That's when that person's going to show up, when we're operating from full acceptance of our desires, full acceptance of our vision and what we want.
Right. That's beautiful. And you mentioned something that really piques my interest. How do you find yourself balancing the masculine and the feminine? Like, there's no
Yeah.
on and off switch, so it's just like, it takes work. I'm just curious how you find yourself doing it.
Yeah. So I used to sway, which I'm sure you could have guessed this, a lot in the masculine. A lot. Actually, one of my exes said to me, God, you're always in your masculine. And at the time I was like, what does that even mean? Like, what do you mean? I'm a woman. Like, I didn't get it. I didn't understand like what he meant by that. And it's true. And I was so disconnected from those feminine parts of me. And I had to learn that on my own, and a lot of it I had to learn the hard way. And now what I've noticed is we all have feminine and masculine in us. That exists, that polarity exists in all of us. And the feminine has a light and healthy side, and it has a shadow, dark side. The masculine has a light and a shadow, dark. Both sides have these also polarities within them, right? And so you start to learn the ways of being in each. For example, receiving is very feminine, right? Being in receiving is feminine. Okay. And so when you're able to identify these feelings and these ways of being that are in each one, you're able to identify what's healthy, what's not. Because how do you identify what's healthy and what's not? Simply by asking, does it work? Does it not work? Right? When I'm working right now and I'm on my computer and I'm leading my team, I am decisive. I am very direct. I'm commanding, right? I'm in that kind of, I don't want to say aggressive, but decisive. That's very masculine. Okay. But it's what's needed of me I need to make decisions to run a business. I need to be doing those things. Right. But then also I've been able to merge something that's very masculine, which is structure, agenda, all those things are very masculine, into flow. I was cut off from flow. I was cut off from intuition. I wasn't letting my intuition make any decisions in business. No. So I've learned how to like go between these two and actually float between because if I don't know the answer logically, logic brain, all that logic, that's very masculine, then I'll tap into my feminine. I'll go sit and I'll meditate. I'll sit in receiving mode. Like what is here for me right now? I'll tap into my heart, into my gut, our sacral chakra for women, very like answers, like you tune in, tap in. So when it comes to leading business, there are beautiful ways that you can lead it in your feminine. And a lot of people think that when you lead your business, it's only masculine. Yes, it definitely sways a lot towards the masculine, but there are beautiful ways that you integrate your feminine and that you listen to your feminine, your intuition. And really quick, it's funny that you are asking this. I just had this conversation with my aunt it's actually Gerard's aunt, but I call her my aunt because I'm super close with her, yesterday in the car. And I said, it's really interesting because normally like on client calls and in communication, I'm very feminine in the way that I communicate. Like I'm like, oh, I'm emoji hearts and little, exclamation points. And I'm very feminine and like floaty, right? With the way I communicate for the most part. Well, I had this client who I had this, we were going back and forth on a deal, and he's real estate. Now, as you can assume, they're natural bred negotiators, right? So I
Right.
set a price and he wanted to keep going back and forth and negotiate. So what did I do? All right, time to ignite my healthy masculine. Feminine ain't going to work with this guy. It's not, right? What works, what doesn't work. Feminine wasn't working. Shifted to my masculine. No explanation points, periods, straight to the point, decisive. It is what it is. This is, if you want to work with me, this is the difference between getting coffee at McDonald's or coffee at Starbucks. Which one do you want? I literally was just, I ignited that side of me, right? So that's an example of how these, it's about floating and flexing into the one that will best serve you and what it is that you're looking to accomplish and create.
I'm curious, are exclamation points feminine?
So think about it this, they're like inflections, right? Inflections and emphasis, right? Which can be a very feminine thing. Like we get excited and we're like, ooh, and this thing and this. And like literally I had my it was funny because my book editor, she was editing my book and she goes, damn it, Ashley, you use explanation points in every sentence. I've had to delete like 80 explanation points. I'm not even like 2 pages in.
That's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so funny. All right. So I'm curious, like, how did you end up getting into business? Like, was that your dream since high school or before then? Like, I'm curious, like, how did that come about?
Oh yeah. I was super studious in school. I was a 4.0 student. I was best friends with all the teachers and part of every, association and club like that. That was
Right.
me. And I had big goals. My dad is definitely the leader or the example that was set. He's an entrepreneur, always has been in terms of his spirit. Right now he works for a corporate company, but he started his own company at age, 27, 29, something like that. And he had instilled in me so much of the entrepreneur, quote unquote, mindset at a young age. So I always knew that I was going to do something big. I didn't obviously know what it was at first. At first I thought I was going to be in finance. Nope. Hate math. No, definitely no. And then I fell in love with a marketing class I took in college. And I was actually also going to do psychology. That was like a big thing that was calling me. And then when I didn't even really know about marketing. And then when I took my first marketing class with Ed Love at Western Washington University, I was like, wait a minute, marketing is like the psychology of business. I was like, this is like made for me, because I couldn't decide if it was going to be business administration, right, which was the
Right.
one part of the college, or if I was going to go the psychology route. And when I took that class, I was like, boom, this is it. And then so I double majored because I was already halfway through my finance major at that point. And then I got my first job at a Shark Tank Mark Cuban company. That was pivotal for me. That was laid the foundation for so much of where I'm at today in business. So that was how I got started.
We have that in common. I actually worked for a shark as well, directly out of college. So I worked with Damon
Me
for 3
too.
years.
Who?
Yeah, Damon, gentleman
No
from Fubu.
way.
Yeah. That was my first job out of college.
What was the company?
It was his company called the Shark Group.
Oh,
Yeah, it was a
cool.
cool opportunity. Cool. We have that in common, but I'm curious to learn, like, if you could, and obviously your business, I've read about it. It's doing phenomenal. Like, congrats on that. What has been like your most monumental takeaway? Like, if you were to give someone starting out today a piece of advice, or maybe not even just starting out, maybe someone that is experienced, like, what do you feel like is your biggest takeaway being in business?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I automatically want to go straight to like how we operate and how we think, aka mindset.
Right.
Because I operated for a long time with through scarcity. And that was something that was ingrained and trained in me by my mother.
Mm.
But it was really, really detrimental to me taking quantum leaps in my life, because I was really boxing myself in. And so shifting from scarcity to abundance was one of the biggest things that I did for myself. Like I used to cry over $4 lattes. Like, why did I just buy it myself? Like I literally was at that place. And of course, everything in my life was reflective of that mindset and those beliefs that I had. So that's the first thing. And the second thing that came to me was trusting intuition and taking those leaps of faith. Now, men ignite that feminine part of you, which is the intuition. You can.
Right.
Women tend to have a very innate, natural, strong intuition that a lot of us have cut off from ourselves. But that for me, like when I had those inklings to leave a job, to take an opportunity, to, prove a business case, right? That I wanted to take a department somewhere and I had to present it, and that was scary, right? Those took leaps of faith and trust in myself and my intuition. And I remember I'd have to call my dad and be like, I'm either going to do something really stupid or like really awesome. Like, what do I do? Because I would get those urges and they were really scary. But that for me, when it comes to, without getting too strategic and like super, like in like nitty gritty, overall, those are my two biggest things that I believe have gotten me to where I am today in terms of business success.
Right. I love that. That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that as well.
Yeah.
Ashley, I know that you have to run soon. I have 3 questions I always ask on the way out of these interviews.
Okay.
The first one is, what is a piece of advice you didn't want to hear at the time it was given to you, but proved to be true over time?
Okay. The one that popped up for me first it was something along the lines of own your brilliance, step out into the spotlight, quit hiding. Women need you to lead them. And
Why
the
didn't you
person who
want to
told
hear
me
that?
the person who told me that was Gary Vaynerchuk at
Okay.
Starbucks in Seattle. I'll never forget that moment. He just looked me dead in the eye and put his finger in my face. And I was like, all right. I ran to my hotel room and I cried for 45 minutes. That's when I was hiding. That's when I was hiding behind omni marketing. Nobody knew at all what I did because I would hide it. Even my close friends thought I was a personal trainer. They had no
Right.
idea I was running a business.
Interesting. Okay. So, what do you feel like has been the most monumental piece of advice you've received? And the reason I ask that, I know it's kind of cliche, but like for me personally, there has been like 2 instances where I've gotten a piece of, maybe even 3, where I've gotten a piece of advice and it was just like a total shift. So it's always good to like bring about these different perspectives. So I'm curious, like, is there multiple or, just one piece of advice that was like transformational to you?
So that one from Gary Vee
Right.
was definitely, and then the other one I would say is, I would have to say, that I'm trying to think. That one I would say was the biggest piece of advice in like recent years. Maybe, you know what? There is one thing. My dad would always say, I would always ask him for the answer. And he did this since I was in school. And I would just still ask him anyway. Like I thought he was going to say something else. But he would always say, you know the answer.
Mm,
You always do.
right.
So do that thing. Call me when you do it. and it's true. It's like he was like, we laugh at this at the dinner table sometimes. It's like, Ashley, you would come to me and you would ask these complex questions that honest to God, I had no idea what the answer was. But I always gave you the best answer. Do you remember what I said? That you know the answer.
Right. That's so powerful. Shout out to dad. That's huge. That's actually
Yeah.
really huge.
He's
So,
the best.
all right, last question for you. And I know this is kind of tough. I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but like if you could only give one piece of advice the rest of your life, meaning if Ashley was hopping on stages, podcasts, writing more books, it could only be about one thing, what would it be?
Own your choices
Own your choices.
and take that intuitive leap of faith because you've got this. And when you feel like you don't got this, trust that God's got this.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. That's awesome. Listen, I've had a blast talking to you. Thank you for hopping on here. I'm going to put all your social links and whatnot in the show notes of the episode, website, all the good stuff. Do you have anything going on that we need to be making people aware of in the process?
I got my Female on Fire, which is my all female container. It's where I support women in unlocking, igniting, and unleashing their fullest self-expression and really, truly knowing that they can have it all. And it just starts with them. So we go deep in that container and we go deep, deep, deep so that they can rise up. And that's what I'm up to right now. It actually kicks off this weekend. And the collective kicks off in March.
That's so awesome. I love that. I'm going to make sure that I have that in the show notes as well. And yeah, it's been amazing. Thank you again for hopping on here, Ashley. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so fun.
Of course.
Born in 92 on the block with the sharks. Come from a different cloth. Y'all would get ripped apart. You wanted diamonds.